Good morning to you and to the listeners of the newsroom. Yes, today is a very great day to South Africa, to Africa, and to the world, because we celebrate the life of a very great man, a man of great virtue, an intellectual and a leader, a person who had a very clear vision about the future, about Africa, and who has distinguished himself by living the life of his own ways and defining freedom the way it's supposed to be, particularly how we should behave as politicians and how we should lead by example. So to us in the PAC, we find it to be a very, very great day, and we remember this icon with pride.
Now, Narius, I want to look at how we are able to keep the discourse of his legacy alive, and also the resources that have been allocated in achieving that. I mean, we're looking at the educational curriculum, the inclusion or lack thereof. We're also looking at the undervaluing of his legacy. Obviously, if we contextualize it, 1960 was pivotal when he, in fact, called for those who ultimately led to about 69 people dying at the Sharpeville massacre, to leave their pastors at home, but leading from the front, obviously taking the lead in that regard. I mean, what is being done or not being done to keep his memory alive? What more should the government be doing?
Look, what we are doing in the PAC is to educate our people who have activities today throughout the country, to educate them about his life, his legacy, what he stood for, particularly what he would have wished today, how he visualized freedom, that we should develop independent thinking and be ourselves. Now, therefore, today, as we celebrate, we try to reconnect with his memories, with his life, with what he wanted to see. It is true that he was a leader who led from the front, who led by example. He could have lived a far more comfortable life because he was well educated, but he chose to remain with his people, to lead the people, not only in words, but in action as well. So that's what makes us to be proud. We are trying very hard in the PAC at all times to ensure that this legacy lives on. You will remember when we come to this point that Sobukwe visuals, he was interviewed so many times, and the people of this country, Africa and the world, are still being denied his voice, just to hear his voice. Even he says, good morning. That is been kept in secret many, many years after he has perished. Now, therefore, and he lived a life where he was isolated for 3 years in Robben Island. He could not talk to anyone. So for that reason, and they wanted to damage the brains that we are supposed to have benefited from as the African people, as a continent, and as the world.
I mean, Narius, we're looking at the ideology that he subscribed to, Pan Africanism, and also how he also further developed the philosophy of African nationalism, amongst many others. So when we look at what he stood for, and perhaps also look at South Africa's place within the African continent, we also see issues of him advocating for ultimately one race. We see the issues of xenophobia, racism, amongst others. How do you think such ideals contribute to, to part of the issues that we're facing in the continent, and also serve as a solution to what is transpiring on the continent today?
So he further developed the concept of non-racialism. Non-racialism as a concept, it was developed by Sobukwe, and it was used. Before then, people used multiracialism, and he was able to intellectually redefine and expose it as not enough to integrate the society and the people. But having said so, we believe that African nationalism, which is supposed to destroy tribalism, ethnicity, regionalism, and the divisions that have led to what we call xenophobia. Xenophobia is basically a chaotic that starts mentally, spiritually, and that is self-denial. But Africans, that are fellow Africans and other people, simply for lack of economic opportunities in a continent and country where such is so plenty. That shows that we are not living in a continent or in a country where true freedom and independence, as visualized by Sobukwe, has been attained.
So just looking at what has been planned from here into to keep his legacy alive, to keep the flag flying, perhaps for his contributions to a post-democratic South Africa that, of course, he never got to enjoy. What are some of those activities that have been planned?
Look, today we have activities throughout the country in different localities and regions. And these activities are to remember him and his life in Ikuruleni, in all the regions of Tswane and throughout the country. We have activities that are meant to celebrate and remember his life and his contribution, and therefore to reconnect once again with his ideals, vision, so that we can eventually have more greater influence to the society and to the entire continent and our people.
And just in terms of some of the unrealized dreams that he might have had, as the founder of the PAC, obviously the organization existed to keep his legacy alive. What are some of those unrealized dreams, and how are you going to ensure that it is, carried on, that it does come to fruition in some sorts?
Yes, the first dream. Well, we've been trying to work very hard to make sure that this organization, the Pan Africanist Congress of Azania, is revived thoroughly and is built so that it can play its role, particularly the central role in the politics of this country and of the continent. And that, as an agenda, we have a program, and we've been doing that. We've been going through tough times, we've been going through rough patches. But we've been tireless, and we will continue to be tireless. And we're inspired by his dream, and we are refusing to give up, because we are following the footsteps of very great men, of very great intellectuals. To a great extent, there are some persecutions, but it is, of course, him and his patience and tolerance that give us exactly the patients that we think we are far more better compared to what he went through.
Narius, you spoke about the importance of awareness and education. And I mean, he was also ultimately affectionately referred to as Prof. So when we look at education and, the various aspects that is alluded to by the narratives, such as political, economic, psychological, etc. I mean, how do we begin to rewrite these narratives to serve a South African history, to serve a South African story, and ultimately also, an African continent and diaspora?
Sure. He basically concluded that education to us means service to our people. So to Sobukwe, the education meant that people should be prepared to serve their people socially, economically, politically, and otherwise. So he believed that the education should be able to prepare the youth for the future role, not for self-service, not to look after themselves, but to serve the nation and their people, to develop themselves, their country, and their people. Now, that is the orientation that Sobukwe and the vision that Sobukwe had on education. And as PAC, we are still inspiring to that vision. It's a great vision, but we see that it's not realized. And at that time, they strive against all odds, where it was very difficult, no resources. Today, there are plenty of resources, but there's a total disorientation in the learning institutions, in education in general. And we are not able to get the outcome that Sobukwe envisaged. We are getting the outcome where people strive in order to be better than other people and for self-service, selfishness, which is totally and completely different to what Sobukwe aspired and anticipated, envisaged that as a free nation and a free people will be striving to achieve.
All right, Narius Moloto, president of the Pan Africanist Congress of Azania, just chatting to us about the legacy of Robert Sobukwe. Again, 40